to this computer. Okay, that's good. Okay, we should be going here now. Let me go to the live stream. See if it's connected. Yep, it just connected. Okay, we're good to go then. I'm going to hear myself all night, but that's okay. I got an echo in my head, so I don't know.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah. I could turn down my volume on this. Hang on, y'all. Just a second. Got too many computers going. My output room. See if this helps. Nope. Y'all still hear me okay there?
Yes.
How about now?
Yes.
Okay. I'm gonna leave it right there. I just have to put up the hearing myself. Okay, let's get started. Last time we were talking about the first two apostles, right? This time we're going to start with the Zebedee brothers. I'm getting an echo bad. Y'all are y'all getting the echo?
There's no echo.
No echo. Okay. All right. Well, I'm just going to go on. Maybe I could take one of these out. No, it's not the air conditioner. It's these Apple iPod things. Okay. James, the older of the two apostle sons of Zebedee, whom Jesus nicknamed the Sons of Thunder, was 30 years old when he became an apostle. He was married, had 4 children, and lived near his parents in the outskirts of Capernaum, Bethsaida. He was a fisherman, playing his calling in company with his younger brother John and in association with Andrew and Simon. James and his brother John enjoyed the advantage of having known Jesus longer than any other of the other apostles. So James was the oldest. Okay, John, who ended up writing the book of Revelation, was the youngest of the 12, and we're going to find that out in a little bit here. So I'm going to go on to the next slide and let my wife.
Can't hear you.
Can't hear you at all. All right, dear, are you muted? No. No, this is strange. Take your ear things out, stick them back into stick them back in your container. Stick them both back. That's because it's coming through. Take it. And then take this.
Up here. Sound.
Okay.
Can hear you now.
You can hear me?
Now can you hear us?
Okay. This able apostle was a contradiction. He seemed
Yes.
Can you
Yes.
hear her reading?
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. He seemed really to possess 2 natures, both of which were actuated by strong feelings. He was particularly vehement when his I don't know if that
Indignation.
indignation was once fully aroused. He had a fiery temper when once it was adequately provoked. He sounds like a lot of people I know. And
Yeah.
when the storm was over, he was always want to justify and excuse his anger under the pretense that it was wholly a manifestation of righteous indignation. Ex- yeah. Except for these periodic upheavals of wrath, James's personality was much like that of Andrew. He did
Okay, we can't hear you now.
public orator
Now, there you go.
among the 12.
I lost my,
Can we redo it?
huh?
Did you want me to redo it?
No, I'm still not, it's not going through my
Well,
ear things.
Diane, she muted out. He did not have Andrew's discretion
Can you
or
hear Roger?
insight into human nature, but he was a much better public speaker. Next to Peter, unless it was Matthew, James was the best public orator among the 12.
Okay, try saying something again, Rodney. I'm
Yeah,
still not hearing
something.
anything.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Huh?
I couldn't hear him before, but I can right now.
You can right now?
Okay.
Okay. I can't hear him at all, so
That's strange.
let me try this.
Well, I'll read the next one. The next
Test
page.
1, 2, 3. Okay.
Could you hear me, Roger?
Input, that's wrong. Okay. Now output. I am sorry, y'all. I'm just I'm going crazy with it. I can't get my earphones to work. Let me unplug this, see if that helps any. I can't get any sound through my iPods, AirPods.
Maybe, is that the Bluetooth? Got to make sure your Bluetooth is on.
See if that helps any.
Sure.
I still got nothing. I can't have a meeting if I can't hear anything. Let me try this, y'all. Let me try it through the Mac Mini speakers. Let me try this.
This is so important to know about the apostles and their particular nature and everything.
I got something. Can y'all hear me?
Yes,
I can hear you perfectly.
can hear you fine.
Somebody say something. Rodney, can you hear me?
Something? Yeah, we can hear you just fine.
Device speakers changed to Yeti microphone, now be used. Output Yeti microphone. Okay, now I can't hear anybody in the meeting though. I can't hear Rodney. I don't think.
Can't hear
Say something,
me?
Rodney.
Not at all.
He can't hear me either, can he?
I can hear you
Yes.
perfectly.
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
She can hear. You can hear me, Rodney?
Yes.
Yeah, but I can't hear you. So
I can hear you.
let me just
Latch
try
can
a
hear you.
set of earplugs here. Earphones. Maybe I can do this. I am sorry, y'all. We keep going through this because I can't get any of the audio to work.
Hmm.
Okay, Rodney, let me see if I can hear you now.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I got you now. Yeah,
Cool.
we're good to go. Okay,
Rock and roll.
rock and roll. That's good. Okay. So where are we at? The apostle temperamental. Okay, so James was a little bit temperamental, but so was John. The thing I wanted to make about the point about this was that John and James both had a temper. Okay, so made it a little bit difficult to work with him. But as John got older, he got in to be in his hundreds. So as he got older, his temper kind of calmed down. So when he wrote the book of Revelation on Patmos, well, dictated it, he had lost most of that temper. Okay. And so it says here that he also had, James had periodic upheavals of wrath. And he said he was much like Andrew in that aspect. And they didn't mention that much that Andrew had.
You would think they'd be,
Different,
Yeah.
But it said James was the best public orator, better than John was. So
So makes you wonder if that was a learned response. Perhaps Father Zebedee was temperamental.
maybe so. That could very well be the case in this situation. So it wouldn't surprise me at all. Right. So let's go on to the next one. Rodney, would you take this one?
Yes. Though James was in no sense moody, he could be quiet and taciturn one day and a very good talker and storyteller the next. He usually talked freely with Jesus, but among the 12, for days at a time, he was the silent man. His one great weakness was these spells of unaccountable silence.
Okay, so he became a very silent man. Did you see me take my hearing aids out? Did you see me take my hearing aids
I
out?
didn't, sweetie. I'm sorry.
I have lost them.
Well, that's good they are.
No, that's my iPods.
Are they in here?
No, they wouldn't fit in there. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm just
It's been an hour night tonight.
having a very hard night here tonight. I hope I didn't sit on them or crush them or something. Okay, so he was in no sense moody, but he could be quiet. In other words, he has these long silent spells, like many people do. In that, all of us do this occasionally. Lech, would you take the next one?
Okay. The outstanding feature of James's personality was his ability to see all sides of a proposition. Of all the 12, he came the nearest to grasping the real import and significance of Jesus' teaching. He, too, was slow at first to comprehend the Master's meaning, but ere they had finished their training, he had acquired a superior concept of Jesus' message. James was able to understand a wide range of human nature. He got along well with the versatile Andrew, the impetuous Peter, and his self-contained brother John.
So he did get along with the four most important, three most important, right? All right. Though James and John had their troubles trying to work together, it was inspiring to observe how how well they got along. They did not succeed quite so well as Andrew and Peter, but they did much better than would ordinarily be expected of two brothers. especially such headstrong and determined brothers. But strange as it may seem, these two sons of Zebedee were much more tolerant of each other than they were of strangers. They had great affection for one another. They had always been happy playmates. It was these sons of thunder who wanted to call fire down from heaven to destroy the Samaritans, who presumed to show disrespect for their master. But the untimely death of James greatly modified the vehement temperament of his younger brother John, so it affected him when James was killed. All right.
It's interesting, with James being 30 and John being 24, 6 years difference. Makes you wonder how they played.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it makes you wonder how they could get along so well, right? All right. That was Gary. He just paged me, told me he can't make it tonight. All right. Did we read this? Probably.
No,
No.
it's Diane's.
Is it my turn?
No, it's mine. The
Oh.
characteristic of Jesus, which James most admired, was the master's sympathetic affection. Jesus understanding interest in the small and great, the rich and the poor, made great appeal to him.
James Zebedee was a well-balanced thinker and planner. Along with Andrew, he was one of the more level-headed of the apostolic group. He was a vigorous individual, but was never in a hurry. He was an excellent balance wheel for Peter.
Visualize them and
Yeah, gives you an idea of what they were like, right?
yeah.
All right. Rodney.
Yes. He was modest and undramatic, a daily server, an unpretentious worker, seeking no special reward when he once grasped something of real meaning of the kingdom. And even in this story about the mother of James and John, who asked that her sons be granted places on the right hand and the left hand of Jesus, it should be remembered that it was the mother who made this request. And when they signified that they were ready to assume such responsibilities, it should be recognized that they were cognizant of the dangers accompanying the master's supposed revolt against the Roman power, and that they were also willing to pay the price. When Jesus asked if they were ready to drink the cup, they replied that they were. And as concerns James, it was literally true. He did drink the cup with the Master, seeing that he was the first of the apostles to experience martyrdom, being early put to death with a sword by Herod Agrippa. James was thus the first of the 12 to sacrifice his life upon the new battle line of the kingdom. Herod Agrippa feared James above all the other apostles. He was indeed often quiet and silent, but he was brave and determined when his convictions were aroused and challenged.
Okay, it should be remembered too that Herod Agrippa murdered James. James was not armed, had no threat to him or anything else, but he literally killed him with a sword, basically as an unarmed man. So he literally murdered him. Now, remember, that is not Stephen, who was the first, huh? Stoned, that's right, who was stoned to death. He was really the first martyr, but James was the first of the apostles to be martyred. Okay, that's the difference between the two. Letch, would you take the next one?
Yeah. James lived his life to the full, and when the end came, he bore himself with such grace and fortitude that even his accuser and informer, who attended his trial and execution, was so touched that he rushed away from the scene of James' death to join himself to the disciples of Jesus.
So the accuser of James that got him in trouble and got him killed actually joined the disciples of Jesus afterwards because of the way he died. Okay. John Zebedee. Okay, this is the youngest of the apostles. Okay. John Zebedee, when he became an apostle, John was 24 years old and was the youngest of the 12. He was unmarried and lived with his parents in Bethsaida. He was a fisherman and worked with his brother James in partnership with Andrew and Peter. Both before and after becoming an apostle, John functioned as the personal agent of Jesus in dealing with the master's family, and he continued to bear this responsibility as long as Mary, the mother of Jesus, lived. Now, we need to remember that it was John Zebedee that assumed the role of taking care of Jesus's mother. She lived about a year after Jesus was crucified, and he took care of her, made sure she had a place to live, and took care of her just like she was his own mother. So that should be brought out here. Okay. After the crucifixion. All right, kind of like I do your mom, right?
Next September, that's not nice.
Yeah. Okay, next.
Me.
You.
Since John was the youngest of the 12 and so closely associated with Jesus and his family affairs, he was very dear to the Master. But it cannot be truthfully said that he was the disciple whom Jesus loved. You would hardly suspect such a magnificent personality as Jesus to be guilty of showing favoritism, of loving one of his apostles more than the others. The fact that John was one of the three personal aides of Jesus lent further color to his mistaken idea. Not to mention that John, along with his brother James, had known Jesus longer than the others.
Now remember, all four of these guys worked with Jesus, building boats and stuff and fishing. So they were well familiar with Jesus. All right, Rodney.
Peter, James, and John were assigned as personal aides to Jesus soon after they became apostles. Shortly after the selection of the 12, and at the time Jesus appointed Andrew to act as director of the group, he said to him, "And now I desire that you assign 2 or 3 of your associates to be with me and to remain by my side, to comfort me and to minister to my daily needs." And Andrew thought best to select for this special duty the next 3 chosen apostles. He would have liked to volunteer for such a blessed service himself, but the Master had already given him his commission. So he immediately directed that Peter, James, and John attach themselves to Jesus.
And that was a wise move, wasn't it? Because they were most familiar with Jesus.
Yeah.
And it says here they were the first chosen apostles, the next 3 first chosen apostles. Okay, Letch, would you take the next one?
Okay. John Zebedee had many lovely traits of character, but one which was not so lovely was his inordinate but usually well-concealed conceit. His long association with Jesus made many and great changes in his character. This conceit was greatly lessened, but after growing old and becoming more or less childish, this self-esteem reappeared to a certain extent, so that when engaged in directing Nathan in the writing of the gospel, which now bears his name, the aged apostle did not hesitate repeatedly to refer to himself as the, quote, "of the fact that John came nearer to being the Tom of Jesus than any other earth mortal, that he was his chosen personal representative in so many matters. It is not strange that he should have come to regard himself as the, quote, disciple whom Jesus loved, unquote, since he most certainly knew he was the disciple whom Jesus so frequently trusted."
Yeah, and Jesus did trust him, didn't he? Because he trusted him with his mother to take care of her, right?
Mm.
All right. The strongest trait in John's character was his dependability. He was prompt and courageous, faithful and devoted. His greatest weakness was this characteristic conceit. He was the youngest member of his father's family and the youngest of the apostolic group. Perhaps he was just a bit spoiled. Maybe he had been humored slightly too much. But the John of after years was a very different type of person than the self-admiring and arbitrary young man who joined the ranks of Jesus' apostles when he was just 24. All right.
Those characteristics of Jesus, which John most appreciated, were the Master's love and unselfishness. These traits made such an impression on him that his whole subsequent life became dominated by the sentiment of love and brotherly devotion. He talked about love and wrote about love. This son of thunder became the apostle of love, just at and Ephesus, when the aged bishop was no longer able to stand in the pulpit and preach, but had to be carried to church in a chair. Wow. And when at the close of the service he was asked to say a few words to the believers. For years he his only utterance was, "My little children, love one another."
So they didn't have wheelchairs back then. You're muted, Roger.
What I said is they didn't have wheelchairs back then. No. Yeah, so they had to carry him in, and that's how he got to be known as the Apostle of Love, because that's what his mission was about. All right,
Okay.
Rodney.
John was a man of few words, except when his temper was aroused. He thought much, but said little. As he grew older, his temper became more subdued, better controlled, but he never overcame his disinclination to talk. He never fully mastered this reticence, but he was gifted with a remarkable and creative imagination.
And that's why he was able to write the book of Revelation, right? We're
No
going to
kidding.
find out about this in a minute here. Letch, would you take the next one?
Yeah. There was another side to John that one would not expect to find in this quiet and introspective type. He was somewhat bigoted and inordinately intolerant. In this respect, he and James were much alike. They both wanted to call down fire from heaven on the heads of the disrespectful Samaritans. When John encountered some strangers teaching in Jesus' name, he promptly forbade them. But he was not the only one of the 12 who was tainted with this kind of self-esteem and superiority consciousness.
Okay, so he didn't like the fact that other people were teaching the gospel of Jesus other than the 12, right?
But Jesus told him,
Yeah.
don't stop them.
Don't stop them, let them
Who's
teach.
for us is not against us.
That's right. John's life was tremendously influenced by the sight of Jesus going about without a home, and he knew how faithfully he had made provisions for care of his mother and his family. John also deeply sympathized with Jesus because of his family's failure to understand him, being aware that they were gradually withdrawing from him. This entire situation, together with Jesus ever deferring the slightest wish to the will of the Father in heaven and his daily life of implicit trust, made such an profound impression on John that he produced marked and permanent changes in his character, changes which manifested themselves throughout his entire subsequent life. So just being around Jesus influenced John in a great deal, right?
And Jesus even now can influence your motives.
Yes, that's true.
John had a cool and daring courage which few of the other apostles possessed. He was the one apostle who followed right along with Jesus the night of his arrest and dared to accompany his master into the very jaws of death. He was present and near at hand right up to the last earthly hour and was found faithfully carrying out his trust with regard to Jesus' mother and ready to receive such additional instructions as might be given during the last moments of the master's mortal existence. One thing is certain, John was thoroughly dependable. John usually sat on Jesus' right hand when the 12 were at meat. He was the first of the 12 really and fully to believe in the resurrection, and he was the first to recognize the master when he came to them on the seashore after his resurrection. That's really cool.
So remember, John was the apostle that went in as Jesus's witness during the trial. Remember that? He had one apostle with him all the way in. He went in and saw everything that happened, recorded in his mind everything that was said and everything that happened to Jesus. And he stayed with Jesus even up to the crucifixion. When he was put on the cross, it was John that Jesus sent to go get his mother. Okay. So that's how much he trusted John. That's pretty important.
Yes.
Okay. The son of Zebedee.
This son of Zebedee was very closely associated with Peter in the early activities of the Christian movement, becoming one of the chief supporters of the Jerusalem church. He was the right hand support of Peter on the day of Pentecost.
Okay. So he was pretty important, right? Letch, would you take the next?
Several years after the martyrdom of James, John married his brother's widow. The last 20 years of his life, he was cared for by a loving granddaughter.
Okay. So he married his brother's widow to take care of their family. John was in prison several times and was banished to the Isle of Patmos for a period for 4 years until another emperor came to power in Rome. Had not John been tactful and sagacious, he would undoubtedly have been killed, as was his more outspoken brother James. As the years passed, John, together with James, the Lord's brother, learned to practice wise conciliation when they appeared before the civil magistrates. They found that a soft answer turns away wrath. They also learned to represent the church as a spiritual brotherhood devoted to the social service of mankind rather than the kingdom of heaven. They taught loving service rather than the ruling power, kingdom, and king. So he tried to put through the concept of the church as a brotherhood, right? Okay.
When in temporary exile on Patmos, John wrote the book of Revelation, which you now have in greatly abridged and distorted form. The book of Revelation contains the surviving fragments of a great revelation, large portions of which were lost, other portions of which were removed and subsequent to John's writing. It is preserved in only fragmentary and adulterated form.
Okay, and why is this so important? Number one, the book of Revelation was a revelation to John. He did not actually go there. It was a revelation. He saw this in his mind. I want to make sure that's clear. He could not have traveled to Jerusalem and actually witnessed this firsthand. It was revealed to him probably like we would a TV or something like that. But the important thing is this: what the revelation he saw was about the Lucifer rebellion, okay? And everything having to do with this revelation is about what went on during the Lucifer rebellion. It wasn't about what was coming, what was past, all this other stuff. And I want to make that perfectly clear. You know, people get this thing like there's going to be a rapture and all this, you know, and they're waiting for these wars and all these things they think came from the book of Revelation. It's poppycock, okay? Tell them Dr. Roger Paul told you it was poppycock. It wasn't true, okay?
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. What truly happened was John was allowed to see the Lucifer rebellion firsthand, what went on in Jerusalem and our local system headquarters during the Lucifer rebellion. And all these things that they talk about in there, even though we only have bits and pieces and fragmentations of it, is what John saw. And he was trying to explain these amazing things that he got to see. And there wasn't any language to do that, was there, in his day and time? So he revealed it the best he could. And that's why so many things are called beast and things like that, like the beast of the four winds and that sort of thing. All these things were things that John saw, and he's trying to relate it in human language that he could share it with other people. Okay, so if you get anything from the book of Revelation that's past the Lucifer rebellion, you are wasting your time. Did I say that? Yes, I did. Wasting your time.
And plus, because it was chopped up so much,
Yeah, you
it
could
makes
make
it confusing.
Yeah, you couldn't make out what they were talking about in the first place, could you? But if you read the Urantia book, 90% of what they're talking about sticks out like a sore thumb because they explain it to you all the way through the Urantia book, but not in one place. It's throughout the entire book. Okay, so if you want to understand the book of Revelation, read the entire Urantia book and you will understand everything. And I'm not being facetious, everything in the book of Revelation in the right context. Okay, that's what I'm saying. Boy, I'm preaching all over the place tonight.
Hallelujah.
All right, can I get a name in? I got it. Okay. Who's up next? I lost my place.
I think Diane.
I think you are.
Okay. John traveled much and labored incessantly, and after becoming bishop of the Asia churches, settled down at Ephesus. He directed his associate Nathan in the writing of the so-called Gospel according to John at Ephesus when he was 99 years old. Of all the 12 apostles, John Zebedee eventually became the outstanding theologian. He died a natural death at Ephesus and in AD 103 when he was 101 years of age.
Ooh,
Wow.
101 is pretty good age, right?
Yeah.
phew.
He made a long time, especially back then. All right. Rodney.
Philip the Curious. Number 5. Philip was the 5th apostle to be chosen, being called when Jesus and his first 4 apostles were on their way from John's rendezvous on the Jordan to Cana of Galilee. Since he lived at Bethsaida, Philip had for some time known of Jesus, but it had not occurred to him that Jesus was a really great man until that day in the Jordan Valley when he said, "Follow me." Philip was also somewhat influenced by the fact that Andrew, Peter, James, and John had accepted Jesus as the deliverer.
Rodney, refresh your memory on what you said the other day about follow me. You remember?
Yeah, it was to say, sit and I'll teach you.
Yeah. Basically,
I'll show you the way.
yeah, become my disciple and I will show you the way, right? So that's what this follow me meant. And so Philip, having known about Jesus, was when Jesus came up to him and invited him to follow him, he did just that, right?
Yeah, it's an invitation to become a disciple.
That's right. All right. Letch, would you take the next one?
Okay. Philip was 27 years of age when he joined the apostles. He had recently been married, but he had no children at this time. The nickname which the apostles gave him signified curiosity. Philip was always wanting to be shown. He never seemed to see very far into any proposition. He was not necessarily dull, but he lacked imagination. This lack of imagination was the great weakness of his character. He was a commonplace and matter-of-fact individual.
Okay, so he was just your average man then, wasn't he? More than anything. All right. When the apostles were organized for service, Philip was made steward, and it was his duty to see that they were at all times supplied with provisions. And he was a good steward. His strongest character was his methodical thoroughness. He was both mathematical and systematic, so he could organize things very well. All right, Diane.
Philip came from a family of 7, 3 boys and 4 girls. He was next to the oldest, and after the resurrection, he baptized his entire family into the kingdom. Philip's people were fisher folk. His father was a very able man, a deep thinker, but his mother was of a very mediocre family. Philip was not a man who could be expected to do big things, but he was a man who could do little things in a big way, do them well and acceptably. Only a few times in 4 years did he fail to have food on hand to satisfy the needs of all. Even the many emergency demands attendant upon the life they lived seldom found him unprepared. The commissary department of the apostolic family was intellectually and efficiently managed.
So he did all he could to make sure that everybody was fed and everything had provisions for everything. Rodney, would you take the next one?
The strong point about Philip was his methodical reliability. The weak point in his makeup was his utter lack of imagination, the absence of the ability to put 2 and 2 together to obtain 4. And it makes you wonder how he was such a good steward.
I don't know. It does.
He was mathematical in the abstract, but not constructive in his imagination. He was almost entirely lacking in certain types of imagination. He was a typical, everyday, and commonplace average man. There were a great many such men and women among the multitudes who came to hear Jesus teach and preach, and they derived great comfort from observing one like themselves elevated to an honored position in the councils of the Master. They derived courage from the fact that one like themselves had already found a high place in the affairs of the kingdom. And Jesus learned much about the way some human minds function as he so patiently listened to Philip's foolish questions, and so many times complied with the steward's request to be shown.
Okay, so he was your average man then what? Okay, out there. So they all accepted him because he was just like they are, right? Lech, would you take the next one?
Yeah. The one quality about Jesus which Philip so continuously admired was the Master's unfailing generosity. Never could Philip find anything in Jesus which was small, niggardly, or stingy, and he worshipped this ever-present and unfailing liberality.
Okay, so he thought Jesus was it, right?
Mhm.
So,
Okay.
100 years ago, that word was accepted.
Yeah, not now, right?
To,
It would be wiped out if they did it now, right? All right. Yeah, I think everybody knows what word you're talking about, right? Okay. All right. There was little about Philip's personality that was impressive. He was often spoken as Philip of Bethsaida, the town where Andrew and Peter lived. He was almost without discerning vision. He was unable to grasp the dramatic possibilities of a given situation. He was not pessimistic, he was simply prosaic. He also greatly lacked in spiritual insight. He would not hesitate to interrupt Jesus in the midst of one of the master's most profound discourses to ask an apparently foolish question. But Jesus never reprimanded him for such thoughtlessness. He was patient with him and considerate of his inability to grasp the deeper meanings of the teachings. Jesus well knew that if he once rebuked Philip for asking these annoying questions, he would only wound this honest soul. But such a reprimand would so hurt Philip that he would never again feel free to ask a question. Jesus knew that on the worlds of space there were untold billions of similar, slow thinking mortals, and he wanted to encourage them all to look to him and always to feel free to come to him with their questions and problems. After all, Jesus was really more interested in Philip's foolish questions than in the sermon he might be preaching. Jesus was supremely interested in men of all kinds of men, right?
He was being supremely kind-hearted, I think.
I think he
Yeah.
was too.
Yeah.
Which brings up an interesting question to me I was thinking about today. Let me throw a monkey wrench in here just to spice things up a little bit tonight. Have y'all ever noticed that if you ever see pictures of aliens, that none of them are fat? Never
Yeah.
thought?
Yeah, I've seen, I've
They're
thought that.
skinny.
They're
Yeah.
skinny, all of them,
Yeah.
aren't they?
Yeah.
You know, the reason I bring that up is this. You know, if we have all these billions worlds out there, and they are like they say they are in the mansion worlds, in other words, when you eat something or drink something, you use 100%. There is no waste. Okay. So they would not get, if they ate or drank anything, they would use all of whatever they ate or drank. So there would be no waste. And it dawned on me today, after all these years looking at all these alien pictures, none of them are fat, so they must use 100% of however they get their nutrition.
Yeah, but they aren't Urantia aliens.
No, they aren't, but still they are beings from other planets which are set up in a certain process, Rodney. So they are not experimental planets like we
Well,
are.
but they're so far superior to us that they've already gotten past what causes
Yeah, all this
that.
stuff. That's right. All this
The
stuff.
American diet is horrible.
Oh, it's awful. But I wanted to bring that point up because it's kind of brings it back to this paragraph about Philip, that he's just an ordinary guy. Okay. And all these planets throughout all the universes are filled up with ordinary people, right? They're not that special. They're just people like we are. And so, you know, that made me think about that as I was studying for this. I was thinking, well, you know, all the aliens we see are skinny. You know, none of them are fat like we are. You know, we're all just Tubos. So I just find that interesting. Okay.
Now I have to read.
Now you have to read, right?
Okay. The apostolic steward was not a good public speaker, but he was a very persuasive and successful personal worker. He was not easily discouraged. He was a plotter and very tenacious in anything he undertook. He had that great and rare gift of saying, "Come." When his first convert, Nathaniel, wanted to argue about the merits and demerits of Jesus of Nazareth, Philip's effective reply was, "Come and see." He was not a dogmatic preacher who exhorted his hearers to go to this and do that. He met all situations as they arose in his work with, "Come, come with me. I will show you the way." And that is always the effective technique in all forms of phases of teaching. Even parents may learn from Philip the better way of saying to their children, not go go do this and go do that, but rather come with us while we show and share with you the better way. That's lovely.
The better way.
Yeah.
Yeah, Letch.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it was. It is. Great way to approach everything, right? Rodney, would you take the next one?
The inability of Philip to adapt himself to a new situation was well shown when the Greeks came to him at Jerusalem, saying, "Sir, we desire to see Jesus." Now Philip would have said to any Jew asking such a question, "Come." But these men were foreigners, and Philip could remember no instructions from his superiors regarding such matters. So the only thing he could think to do was to consult the chief, Andrew, and then they both escorted the inquiring Greeks to Jesus. Likewise, when he went into Samaria, preaching and baptizing believers, as he had always been instructed by his master, he refrained from laying hands on his converts in token of their having received the Spirit of truth. This was done by Peter and John, who presently came down from Jerusalem to observe his work in behalf of the mother church.
Okay, so their process was to lay hands on them in recognition of having received the Spirit of truth. Okay. Letch, would you take the next one?
Philip went on through the trying times of the Master's death, participated in the reorganization of the 12, and was the first to go forth to win souls for the kingdom outside of the immediate Jewish ranks, being most successful in his work for the Samaritans and in all his subsequent labors in behalf of the gospel.
So he went forth and spread the news then, didn't he? Philip's wife, who was an efficient member of the women's corps, became actively associated with her husband in his evangelic work after the flight from Jerusalem prosecution. His wife was a fearless woman. She stood in the foot of Philip's cross, encouraged him to proclaim the glad tidings even to his murderers. And when his strength had failed, she began reciting the story of salvation by faith in Jesus. Did you notice that?
Mm-hmm.
Recital of the story of salvation by faith, not by sacrifice, right? In Jesus, was silently only when the irate Jews rushed upon her, stoned her to death. Their eldest daughter, Leah, continued their work later on, becoming the renowned prophetess of Hierapolis. All right, Diane.
Philip, the one-time steward of the 12, was a mighty man in the kingdom, winning souls wherever he went. And he was finally crucified for the faith and buried at Hierapolis. Well,
Okay, that's it for tonight, y'all. We're going to start with Honest Nathaniel on Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Yeah, it's Thursday, isn't it? Man, weeks go by so fast.
Flies.
It really does. So we'll take it up from there. Let me stop the share and we'll do the prayer for us tonight. There we go. And Letch, would you like to read the prayer for us tonight?
Sure. Prayer of acceptance. I believe that God is my paradise Father, and that only by faith am I saved. No sacrifice is necessary. By this same faith I became a child of God, and know that all men and women are my brothers and sisters. We know the Son of God, the sovereign of our universe of Nebadon, as Christ Michael, Jesus of Nazareth. By allowing the will of God to become my will, I will someday stand in the presence of the Paradise Father. In the name of Christ Michael, Jesus of Nazareth. Amen.
Amen. And thanks everyone for coming to join us tonight. Please come see us again. Sorry for all the technical problems to start out. I'll try to get them straightened out next time before we start. The problem is when I start, I don't know if I'm going to have problems with my microphone and earphones and all that until we get started because I don't have anybody here early. So, so it just is what it is, and we'll work it out as we go. We'll figure it out sooner or later, right?
Yeah.
All right. Y'all have a great night. Thank you for coming. We loved you
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you, Roger.
You're
And
welcome.
Diane.
And we
Bye-bye.
will see everybody Tuesday. All right.
Okay.
Love you guys.
You too.
Love
Love you too.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.